Mr. Liang Menghua.
Question 2, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the government understands and shares Singaporeans' concern with cost of living issues. This is a multi-dimensional issue. Let me explain. There are absolute measures of how the prices of a particular basket of goods and services change over time. There can also be relative and evolving interpretations of what constitutes an essential basket of goods and services for different groups of Singaporeans. Yet, the cost of living pressures can also be an expression of the gap between one's aspirations and one's anticipated means to fulfill them. Different groups of Singaporeans have different concerns, needs, and wants. Elderly Singaporeans, retirees, and their families will be more concerned with healthcare affordability. Families with young children and infants may be more concerned with the prices of milk powder and educational programs. Yet other families may be aspiring to buy their dream house or car. As such, no single measure will express an individual's cost of living pressures fully, given the different needs and wants, the evolving aspirations, and the potential gap between aspirations and anticipated means. Furthermore, we are also aware that some price items, while not the biggest in absolute impact, can have a disproportionate psychological impact on consumers. For example, water and transport fares falls into this category because they are items consumed daily. The bunching of price increases, like the increases in water and electricity prices this month, can also have a disproportionate psychological impact on Singaporeans. Mr. Speaker, sir, may I have your permission to distribute the first set of charts to members of the House?
Yes, please.
Mr. Speaker, sir, our consumer price indices capture the absolute price changes of different baskets of goods and services for different groups of Singaporeans. We will look at the first chart, the top one on the first page. Last year, the Consumer Price Index for all items, or CPI for all items, inflation was at plus 0.6%. Lower than the average of plus 2.3% between 2007 and 2017. In fact, inflation over the last 5 years, between 2012 and 2017, at an average of plus 0.6% a year, was significantly lower than the preceding 5 years between 2007 and 2012, which averaged plus 4%. If we consider the CPI all items less imputed rental, the figure was 1.7 for 2017, and this can be seen in the second chart. The 2017 inflation figures for the various household income groups with their respective baskets of goods and services were 0.1% for the lowest 20%, 0.5% for the middle 60%, and 0.8% for the top 20%. Now, beyond this number, I've also asked MTI to do a check on certain groups of household. So specifically, I asked them to look at the retiree households. For the retiree household, the figure for last year was negative 0.4%. However, I asked them to strip out the imputed rental for owner-occupied accommodation from CPI. because this will give an indication of the inflation pressures that they might feel from the cash outlay. Then inflation for retiree household was plus 2.1% last year, higher than other household income groups. While it is low, it is nevertheless an issue that we need to pay close attention to. We know that inflation is a concern for retirees with no active income from work. This is why the government has focused much attention on help schemes for our seniors, starting with the Pioneer Generation Package. In addition to transport and healthcare subsidies for the elderly, we are also encouraged to see our social enterprises and businesses stepping up to help ease cost pressures on them by giving our seniors additional discounts. We also monitor the inflation of key categories of goods and services, for example, food, healthcare, and utilities, because they can have a big psychological impact on the daily lived experience of Singaporeans. In the charts, members will be able to see that the inflation rate was lower over the recent 5-year period between 2012 and 2017 for all household types as compared to the 5-year period from 2007 to 2012. Inflation rates were also lower for the key components of food, healthcare, and utilities and fuel for these household types. However, we should note the sharp pickup in inflation rate for utilities and fuel last year, and this was largely due to the higher oil price. Over the last year, the oil price have gone on from $50+ per barrel to $70+ per barrel, a significant increase. CPI all items inflation is expected to remain low this year, between 0.5 to 1%. However, rising global oil prices is projected to increase fuel costs and electricity prices. This, coupled with an increase in global food commodity prices, could impact domestic food prices. Consumer prices could also rise moderately alongside a faster pace of wage growth and picked up in domestic demand amidst improvements in the labour market. Accommodation costs are expected to continue to decline with a sustained fall in rentals, thereby dampening inflation. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me now move on to some other factors that influence prices. We closely monitor prices to ensure that Singapore remains an affordable home for Singaporeans. There are some factors not within our control, and there are other factors that we have to work hard to constantly manage. As a small and open economy that imports most of our food items, we are subject to global economic forces. Electricity and fuel costs, which are influenced by global oil prices, is one such example. The prices of certain products are also affected by our market size. Major companies determine their pricing strategies based on the purchasing power and relative bargaining power of different markets. The price of certain medicine is one such example. To manage the various pressure points, we must adopt a multi-pronged strategy. Let me elaborate on our 8-pronged strategy, and after this, I will distribute a set of infographics for members to share with your residents. First, we need to keep our economy competitive. At the macro level, the government will aim to establish the conditions for companies to create good jobs with sustained real income growth to outpace inflation. Over the last 5 years, resident households' income had risen faster than consumer price inflation. Median resident household income from work per member grew by 4.2% per annum in real terms between 2012 and 2017, while that for the lower income deciles rose between 4.2 to 4.6% per annum. Now, in the long run, real wage growth is determined by our ability to raise productivity. Schemes such as the Productivity Solutions Grant aim to help companies to do so. Other schemes like the Special Employment Credit support employment opportunities for low-income and older Singaporeans, while the Workfare Income Supplement Scheme helps low-wage workers supplement their incomes and build up their retirement savings. We also need to constantly monitor the wages of workers in industry facing significant disruptions. The best way for us to help our workers facing low or stagnating wage growth is to equip them with new skills and take on new jobs ahead of time. This is where schemes like Adapt and Grow come in place to help our workers. Let me move on to the second strategy. That is to carefully manage the strength of the Sing dollar. We carefully manage our reserves and the strength of our dollar to contain imported inflation. MAS exchange rate-centered monetary policy through a gradual appreciation of the trade-weighted Singapore dollar in line with our economy's underlying fundamental helps to preserve our purchasing power. Third, diversifying our sources of supply. We do so from food and water to fuel and raw materials for production to ensure that we are not held ransom by any single source. This bolsters the security and resilience of our resource supply chains and avoid such price hikes when there are disruptions to our primary sources. Fourth, promoting competition in our markets and lowering barriers of entry where possible to allow Singaporeans enjoy competitive prices for comparable products. For example, the Energy Market Authority of Singapore, or EMA, has progressively opened up the electricity market to competition since 2001. In April this year, EMA commenced the soft launch of the open electricity market in Jurong, allowing 108,000 households and 9,500 small businesses the option to buy electricity from a retailer with a price plan that best meets their needs. Consumer feedback so far has been positive, with 13 electricity retailers offering a good range of competitively priced plans. I'm happy to announce that EMA is working on extending the open electricity market to the rest of Singapore from the later part of this year for all Singaporeans to enjoy the benefits of the open electricity market. Another example is the market for mobile telecommunication services, where IMDA's regulatory measures to facilitate greater competition in recent years have led to an increasingly vibrant and competitive mobile market. New mobile operators are offering competitive and innovative mobile plans, including plans that allow for unlimited data or those that start from $0. Fifth, we must manage the cost of doing business in Singapore. We must continue to simplify our processes and reduce business costs to minimize the pass-through of costs to consumers. To keep domestic sources of inflation contained, we will continue to carefully manage domestic supply-side constraints. For instance, the government will ensure an adequate supply of residential, industrial, and commercial space to relieve price and rental cost pressures as demand grows. We will also carefully monitor property market trends and take necessary actions to avoid sharp price changes that are not supported by market fundamentals. As a general principle, we price services fairly to recover costs and discourage overconsumption. However, our government agencies are also frequently reminded and are committed to keeping our costs under control to avoid imposing additional burden on businesses and consumers. Various agencies are now using the price quality model for tender evaluations to moderate the excesses of pure price competition. This can be seen in the case of new hawker centre tenders. Since 2012, NEA, the National Environment Agency, has removed reserve rental in the tender for stores in hawker centres, and 52% of stores are awarded at bids below reserve rental today. NEA has also announced that 20 new hawker centres with approximately 800 stores will be built by 2027, and the managing agents appointed to run these new centres, some of which are social enterprises, will also be required to provide affordable food options in each of these hawker centres. Another example is the Early Childhood and Development Agency's use of the anchor operator and partner operator schemes to provide quality early childhood care and education at affordable prices. The Pro-Enterprise panel will also work with businesses to find meaningful and effective ways to help lower regulatory costs for businesses, which include improving regulatory efficiency, simplifying processes, and removing unnecessary licenses. 6. Focusing our help schemes to do more for those with less. This is an accepted principle by most Singaporeans, but we also understand that various groups of Singaporeans would like to see more being done for them, be it in the areas of education, housing, healthcare, transport, or other policies. Ultimately, we must forge a social consensus on how much we want to tax the general public to support the desired groups in a targeted manner. For example, we do not subsidize electricity or petrol prices upfront. That would disproportionately benefit wealthier households as they tend to consume more of such goods. Instead, the government provides U-Save rebates, with households living in smaller HDB flats getting a higher amount. In Budget 2017, the government announced a permanent increase to the GST voucher U-Save rebate to offset some of the increases in utility bills for the lower and lower middle income household following the water price revisions. With the additional U-Save rebates, 1- and 2-room HDB household, including most 3-roomers, will not see an increase in overall water bills on average. While this strategy is economically and socially sound, it comes with 2 challenges. First, by not subsidizing prices upfront, consumers may experience a higher sticker price. This may create a disproportionate negative psychological impact because the back-end subsidies to help lower income groups reduce the actual prices paid is not as obvious or visible. Second, it is always politically more difficult to carry the ground when different groups of people receive varying levels of assistance because they are assessed to have different needs. Regardless of the method of needs assessment, it will often be fraught with debate and challenged by those who receive relatively less help. However, the alternative to give the same help to all without discrimination also cannot be the wisest way to expend our finite resources to help those who need it most. 7. Enabling consumers' choice. We will work with NTUC to strengthen case capabilities to better promote consumer awareness and empower consumers to make informed purchasing choices to stretch their hard-earned dollar. One way is to improve price transparency on common household items like groceries and cooked food so that consumers can be more informed. Today, with technology and crowdsourcing platforms, consumers should be much better able to make informed choices on where are the best deals in their local neighborhoods. We will work with NTUC and CASE to see how best to bring about such platforms for our consumers tapping on the local networks. We will also work with NTUC and CASE to establish a panel comprising relevant stakeholders such as merchant associations, unions and grassroots leaders to help oversee this effort and look into ground feedback to help consumers stretch their hard-earned dollar while deterring unfair pricing of consumer necessities. Last but not least, our 8th strategy, leveraging on our social enterprises. The government will continue to work with social enterprises like NTUC to benchmark the prices of various essentials. This was the origin of the welcome supermarkets for groceries many years ago. NTUC Fair Price continues to expand its house brand product range of affordable, value-for-money alternatives. We will work with NTUC to establish more NTUC Fair Price shops in our neighborhoods to make affordable products more accessible to all. NTUC Social Enterprises has over the years extended its offering to include basic insurance, childcare, elder care services, and cooked foods options to meet the evolving needs of Singaporeans. By helping to moderate the prices of essential goods and services, social enterprises such as NTUC play an important role in benchmarking prices across the board. Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, may I distribute the infographics to the members now before I conclude?
Yes, please.
We should be getting a set of 3. should be a set of 3, one in yellow for the senior citizens, one in pink for families with school-going children, and one in blue for young couples. And there will be more of this in the members' room later for members who wish to have more copies to distribute to their residents to help reassure our residents that we will do what we can to help everyone manage their cost of living issues. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me conclude. Cost of living pressures will always be present in various forms. Managing the challenges is never-ending work. There are many factors that drive price changes. There are also real and perceived gaps between Singaporeans' aspirations and anticipated means to fulfill these aspirations. More importantly, we recognize Singaporeans' evolving aspirations for a better life for themselves and our families, and the associated stress of achieving real income growth in a volatile economic environment. The government remains committed to helping all Singaporeans manage and achieve their aspirations. Beyond creating opportunities for Singaporeans to enjoy real wage growth to meet their aspirations, the government is also committed to help Singaporeans stretch their hard-earned dollars. At the same time, we are also cognizant that with finite resources, support must first and foremost be given to those most in need.
Mr. Liang Eng Hua.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the Minister for a very comprehensive reply. Heartened that the government is paying attention to this issue and harnessing the whole of government, the whole of society to deal with this ongoing concern. I have a further question for the Minister. While I appreciate the efforts that are targeted primarily at the low-income Singaporeans to cope with the increased cost of living, I would like to ask the Minister, what more can the government do to help the middle class, the middle income group? This group are unlikely to qualify for most of the schemes, or the subsidies are often tiered lower due to their higher income. And understandably, they do aspire to live well, and they also want to have better lifestyle, whether it's wants or needs. And they are feeling that the household expenditures are also rising as their financial commitments increases. So I would like to ask the Minister, how can the government help this group deal with the money not enough cost pressure that they're facing?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank Mr. Liang Eng Hua for his supplementary question. Let me first make a clarification. I think the government is concerned not just with the lower income, and that's the reason why I've asked MTI and the various agencies to look across the entire spectrum of families in Singapore, retirees, middle income groups, because they all face different pressures. Of course, as a general policy, we try to do more for those from the lower income and perhaps the retirees first. Having said that, the government is very aware of the aspirations and the needs of the middle income groups. That's why we have a broad-based swath of measures that I've alluded to help everyone in Singapore. But specifically for the middle income groups, there are also various schemes that the government will extend to help them. It may not be in the same quantum as the lower income group, but generally they do get some different forms of help and different tiers of help. If members might recall that once upon a time when I was in MSF, I show everyone a chart, a diagram, which is now euphemistically known as the Kueh Lapis chart. That we try to help everyone in Singapore by making sure that those with the least get the most. But that doesn't mean that those with more did not get anything. It's just a tiering of the different help schemes that they have. So for many of the middle income, I think their concerns will be the education for their children, and perhaps the utilities bill that they have to face, and also many of them will be taking care of their elderly parents as well. We are very aware of this, and the way we do this to help them is as follows. First, we try to do as much as we can to take care of our seniors, to relieve the burden from the middle income household with elderly parents. Number two, we want to make sure that the children's educations remain affordable and everyone will have similar opportunities to excel and to fulfill their potential. Our promise as a government is that so long as someone is capable and committed, they should not need to have to worry about their means, their family circumstances. And that's why we give out as many scholarships as possible, bursary awards as possible to help our students excel. So by relieving the pressures from the older folks and the younger folks, we hope to relieve the pressures on the middle income, middle-aged families. And I would like to add one more point. Beyond looking at the averages, I myself has personally asked my staff to look at each of the decile bands. Because while our averages are moving up, we are obviously conscious that not everyone will move up at the same pace or the same rate. And we will have to pay particular attention to the group that I mentioned just now, who have lower wage increases or stagnating wage increases because their industries are going through rapid transformation. And this is where we'll work closely with MOM and NTUC to help our workers transit to new industry, to acquire new skills, take on new jobs before they are displaced. And finally, maybe I'd just like to share a story that my grandmother used to tell me. I mean, members would probably know that I come from a single-parent family, so my mother has to work 2 jobs when we were young, so I was brought up by my maternal grandmother. There are 3 things that I always remember her teaching me about managing our family finances. First, she always reminded me that I must get a good job. I must make sure that I earn enough to take care of the family. It's a reminder to urge us to study hard, to acquire the correct skills, and that so long as we are prepared to work hard, there will be an opportunity in Singapore for us to succeed. And this is also the same philosophy and commitment that I bring with me to MTI, NTUC and MSF, that we must help our workers first and foremost to have those opportunities to realize their aspirations and ambitions. The second lesson that my grandmother always drummed into us is that we should aim high. And Singaporeans, like all of us here, it's not a sin to aim high. We should all aim high, but yet at the same time, we must know our own strengths and weaknesses so that we do not stress ourselves or overly stress ourselves and our families. We must know where our capabilities are, what we are good at. But as we aim high, we must also be realistic in how we achieve those ambitions. The Chinese say, 适可而止, knowing our own limits. Second lesson. But the third thing that my grandmother always reminded me was that regardless of our family circumstances, we must always have a care for those who are less fortunate than us and who may need a bit more help than us. During my time, I never knew that there was something called MPS, to go and see MP. We didn't have SSOs. We had Fuli Bu or Hok Lei Po. But I was always reminded that that is really for those who really, really need help, and that we should always try to take care of ourselves and at the same time take care of other people. And I think these 3 rules is quite instructive in how we approach this issue of cost of living. First, I think we must make sure that every Singaporean have good jobs that can allow them to fulfill their potential. Second, we must help Singaporeans to stretch their hard-earned dollars, that while in pursuing their ambitions and aspirations, that we are also realistic about our options and how we should distinguish the needs and the wants so that our families can have a better quality of life that is sustainable. Last but not least, with the resources that we have, either as a family or as a society, we must make sure that we give the most help to those who need it a bit more than us.
Engineer Libiwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Thanks, Minister, for your very inspiring sharing of your stories. I have 3 supplementary questions. I would like to ask Minister, the item on the food price, how is it being computed? Because it shows that there's a declining from 2007 until 2017. But then, if you were to look at the price at a coffee shop, definitely that is not a trend. Second question, I have residents who keep telling me that food in some of the coffee shops has gone up even before the effect of water price increase or electricity tariff increase. And each increase in the food price now is a lot, 50 cents, from $3 to $3.50, from $3.50 to $4, unlike previously increases 10 cents or 20 cents. So I would like to ask Minister, will your ministry set up a committee to look into anti-profiteering? Please don't ask my resident to go to case because it affects all Singaporeans. Third question, I also got a feedback from residents because in Nee South we have NTUC, we also have Sheng Siong. And I heard from residents that, giving due respect to our colleague, Mr. Seah Kian Peng, and those who in NTUC, the food or the price of those things sold in NTUC nowadays are not necessarily is cheapest. So I would like to urge Minister to look into this. Thank you.
Thank you for the members. It's actually a valuable opportunity for me to clarify some things. I won't speak on behalf of NTUC FairPrice. I will share my experience as a previous and immediate past NTUC SecGen, and I think this is important. Let me first share on the charts first. The way to read the chart is that it's not that the food prices is decreasing. The rate of increase has come down. These are the rates of increase. The one I think you saw is the second chart, right? That means the food prices are still increasing, but the rate has come down from what used to be 3.3% to 2.1% to 1.4%. It is an increase, but a slower rate of increase. Part of it, it could be, okay, then how is this computed? That's why I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, some of the food items and the prices will have a disproportionate impact because in our psychological perception, because we use it every day. So for example, coffee prices at coffee shops will be one very clear indicator. But in the overall basket of goods, coffee prices is but one item in the basket of goods. So how a basket of goods is constituted statistically is by the spending pattern of the different household types, and different household types have different basket of goods. So the first clarification is that it's not that the prices are not increasing, but they are increasing at a different rate, and it also depends on the basket of goods. So if you look at the charts, for example, in the top chart, that's why we have broken it down into the bottom 20%, middle 60%, and top 20%. Each of the three groups, including the retiree household, also have a different basket of goods because their consumption patterns are different. So that's the first thing. The second thing, whether we will set up the anti-profiteering committee, I have thought long and hard about this thing, and we have previous experiences on how to be more effective, which is why in the number 7 strategy, I propose to do things a bit differently to give us better result and faster result. You see, if you set up a committee to go and look at coffee price in one coffee shop, and you look up, then there will be many of these cases. The speed is not just fast enough. And you ask a committee to go and decide whether the price is fair or not, it's also actually quite difficult. But today, actually, we have a better platform that can do this for us. Today, actually, with a lot of the crowdsourcing platforms, actually, when people put their prices down there, you can do an instant comparison. And I think this is even more effective in deterring those merchants that may be pricing their goods unfairly. So, for example, in Yishun, our favorite constituency, supposing we can set up an area to tell people where in Yishun is the cheapest coffee, the cheapest kaya toast, and if your people can access the information easily, and people can freely put and make available the prices that they are offering in Yishun, then I think it will help consumers to stretch their hard-earned dollars, and it will be a much faster process than trying to submit a coffee price increase to someone else and come back later in that process. And in this open and transparent platform, I think it will also help to deter those people who may want to price their products that is out of the norm. So this is why I asked to work with NTUC and CASE to proliferate or promote this platform so that we can get a faster response time. Surely, as you say, you don't want to, for one coffee shop, then we send to CASE, then wait for 2 weeks and come back with the result. That won't be very useful. And you also want a certain deterrence effect that people do not spread false rumors. Like, for example, what you have suggested. Some people say that I'm increasing my price because of the GST hikes, but the GST hikes is not even coming in for a few years' time. So that's obviously not the right reason that they are doing what they are doing. So I hope that through such open platform and open sharing, we can have a faster response to some of these ground issues. Last but not least, I am not stealing the thunder from Ken Peng, member Mr. Seah Ken Peng. This is a common question that I've always been asked, that why is it that once in a while, the NTUC as a social enterprise have other people who beat their prices? Now, on behalf of Ken Peng, from what I understood from him, NTUC actually has a basket of 500 items. And NTUC Fair Price monitor the 500 items every day, their own 500 items and what the market is selling. And they will make sure that on average, their 500 items will be 4-5% below the whole basket of goods. But that doesn't mean that every item is 4-5% below the NTUC, below the market price. Now, on the other hand, if we study marketing, we will also know that from part of the sales and strategy, it is in my interest as the competitor to NTUC to make sure that every day I have a few items below NTUC prices, in order to attract people to go there, because when you go there, you don't just buy that few items under discount. So this is actually quite common in the FMCG or fast-moving consumer goods market. Now, of course, having said that, I'm quite sure NTUC Fair Price will be working very hard to source from multiple agencies to try and reduce the prices, including the recent efforts on the milk powder, the number of house brands that they continue to expand their products, and so forth. So I think that is the commitment to NTUC. And one very interesting question that I've always pondered in my mind is not so much as whether Sheng Siong or Dairy Farm is able to meet NTUC prices and beat NTUC prices. The question is that if we don't have social enterprises to benchmark some of these things, would the other competitors still charge those prices? That was actually the story of the Welcome supermarket in the 1970s. It's not that they just meet NTUC prices or try to beat NTUC prices once in a while, that it was because of the benchmark. And this is not just groceries. Today, NTUC in the sector of elder care, early childhood education also perform the same role, which is they help and work with the ministries to understand the benchmark and the drivers for those services. And because of that, the entire market has an anchor point, if you like, in their pricing strategy and will not be carried away with just a price competition.
Mr. Saktiandi.
Thank you, Minister, for your comprehensive explanation earlier with the charts. I just have one quick question in terms of the impact of economic forces such as the interest rate outlook going forward. What would be Minister's view about that? Because with the Fed probably raising rates, it would have impact on Singaporeans in terms of cash outlay in the future, and what's probably the transmission mechanism, taking into consideration the fact that we are a exchange rate policy regime, but what would be the impact of the interest rate outlook going forward and impact on Singaporeans? Thanks.
Thank you for the supplementary questions. Let me answer this question the following way. Yesterday, when we talked about the impact of the trade wars, I briefly mentioned this. So likewise, for any interest rate hikes across the global markets, I think there's a direct and indirect impact. The direct impact is, of course, it adds to the cost of doing business. And the second impact is that, of course, it will affect the relative exchange rates, which will then affect the strength of the Sing dollar to contain imported inflation. But the most important third-level impact of any interest rate hikes across the world is the impact on the global business confidence. Because if, because of the trade wars and because of the interest rate hike, that it leads to an overall dampening of the global confidence level and people's investment, then what affects us most severely is the job creations. And if we cannot continue to create good jobs for our people, the rest of all these other help schemes are actually secondary. Because we first and foremost must have good jobs for our people, our economy grows, our people have jobs, and we have the means to help each other by redistributing some of the gains from this entire economic system. But if the economy shrinks because of the downturn in global market confidence, then I think there's a significant impact. So there's three levels of impact: the direct interest rate cost that you mentioned on business, the impact on the exchange rate, which affects our ability to contain imported inflation. Third, and most importantly, together with the headwinds that we face on the global trading environment, how it affects our economy and our ability to continue to create good jobs for our people to earn good incomes.
Mr. Seah Kem Peng.
Thank the Minister and former Secretary General for his answers. I just have a few questions for him. I think indeed cost of living is a big issue, and the 8-prong approach that he has outlined, the strategies, I think are all very important ones. I just want to say that in addition, I think one key aspect in how, perhaps it's within the 8, but I didn't hear it, is about consumer education. Consumer education, I think, frankly, I think all of us know that eating in is a lot cheaper than eating out, wherever you may go. So things like that may be simple tips, but I think it's useful tips, which I think could be incorporated within the 8 tips that you have. And speaking as an employer too, I think the cost of doing business is indeed something which needs to be addressed. I know Minister has outlined some of them. In the case of at least my business at NTUC FairPrice is in labor, rent, and utilities. These are the 3 biggest cost levers. And government, I think on utilities, I think we all look forward to the opening up of the electricity market. So that will help all businesses and individuals alike. But I think on the part of labor and rent, I think these are areas which government is in a position to see how it can continue to effect a dampening of that. I won't go into during tea, I will explain to Engineer Lee Bee-hua on some of the things. I'll fill her in on other details. And my final point is that running the head, again, declaring my interest as CEO of NTUC FairPrice and also part of the NTUC Enterprise Network. I think your 8 strategy about leveraging on social enterprises, this is something that the NTUC Group and the NTUC Enterprises will be certainly keen to work and to play a part in seeing how, as a group, we can address this very important issue for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seah, for your questions and comments. First, consumer education is my strategy number 7. That's why we work closely with CASE to enable consumer choices. Now, let me say this. We are not here to judge whether somebody should buy this or buy that and what should be necessary for your particular lifestyle. I mean, if you can afford it, you want to do it, by all means. But I think our job is to enable consumer choice through consumer education. So I take the recent example of a case of the milk powder. Actually, personally, I was the one who sent Kem Peng, I think he still had the photo, of one day when I was shopping at NTUC FairPrice. I was very perturbed because when I walked down the food aisles, the only food item, a single item that cost more than $100 for some of the products was milk powder. And I was very intrigued. Why is it that there are milk powder that cost $30, same size, same volume, that cost $30-something, $80-something, and $120? I took the photo, I sent it to Kem Peng, and I asked him, which is the most popular brand? That means from sales. It was the $80 on average brand. And I was very puzzled. What's the difference between the $30 brand, the $80 brand, and the $120 brand? So the $120 brand was because of some ingredients that the children might be allergic to, and that's why there's a special formulation, so I can understand. But then what about the $30 versus the $80 brand? And I asked Kem Peng if he could bring in more of the $30 brand. And his answer was also quite telling. They have tried before, but it didn't sell well. Why? Because maybe some consumers and maybe parents like us will always want the best for our children, and we wonder, should we stinge on that $50 extra for one can of milk powder? What if there are real benefits which my child is not getting? And we can understand that kind of psychology. But over time, I think through consumer education, we have been able to expand the market share of the $30 plus brand, including some of the house brands that NTUC FairPrice has brought in. But today, if I'm not wrong, the $80 plus brand is still the most popular range segment. And that shows that it has come down, but it's still quite high. And that shows that actually all of us can play our part to assure family members of the quality of the products And NTUC has a lot of house brands, but again, when I was in SecGen, NTUC, they won't always sell the most, or being the most popular brand. But it's okay. So long as we have a variety of choices for our consumers, I think we let them choose within their means to see what best suits their family needs. So the consumer education is very important. We agree on with your second point that utilities, rents and labor will of course be concerns for the businesses, which is why we are extending the opening of the open electricity market to more retailers, to more consumers and small businesses. And for rents, as I've mentioned, we will closely monitor the trend to make sure that the rents do not spike up because of insufficient space for our businesses to do their business. And last but not least, we thank NTUC Enterprises for continuing to show leadership in the pricing of its many products and services beyond groceries today, including healthcare, elder care, and also childcare.
Mr. Lim Belchuan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, this is a point of privilege because case was mentioned. I was hoping that Minister Chan will also say something about case, but he only defended NTUC fair price. So if I may just clarify for the Honourable Member for Yishun, to provide feedback, you do not need to be a member of CASE. You only need to be a member of CASE if you want CASE to be to represent the consumer, to liaise with business. On the point by the member, Engineer Dr. Lee Biwa, that complaining to CASE has no effect because price. Okay, you don't want the consumer to go to CASE because price have gone up. The reality, as Minister Chan has mentioned, which is that every business has different price pressure. So their rental may be more expensive because they're in better locality. They may have to pay more for their staff. So CASE finds it very difficult really to be able to decide which business is profiteering because they set higher prices. But CASE will be happy to work with MTI to try to provide better transparency so that consumers will be able to know what businesses provide best value to consumers. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to raise that clarification on behalf of CASE.
Engineer Lee Biwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I didn't say that it's not effective handled by CASE. What I meant is that the cost of living or the profiteering issue affect every Singaporean. We don't want every Singaporean to go to CASE. Same as we don't want every Obai victims to go to CASE because they'll be flooded by all these cases. We would like the ministry to set up a committee to look into specific cases because one store increased 50 cents, next day another store also increased 50 cents. It has its chain effect. Thank you.
Engineer Lee Biwa can settle with Mr. Seah and Mr. Lim later at tea. Mr. Yee Chia Siang.
Thank you, Speaker, sir. To the Minister for Trade and Industry, I highlight this rental again. I brought this issue up during the opening of the second session of this Parliament. I think a lot of businesses, because they sign short leases of 3 years, and every time the lease is due for renewal, they face a big surprise from the landlord saying the rental going forward will increase by a huge amount. And if they don't renew, they have to reinstate. And the landlord is actually using this friction of having to incur reinstatement costs to their advantage. And all this actually feeds to the cost of living because the businesses suffer the higher cost on renewal, the rental rates, and because of that they have to charge higher. So I hope MTI will really look into my suggestions of having longer lease periods as well as mandating that the landlords should not put the reinstatement clause into all their tenancy contracts. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, sir, just two comments in response to Member Engineer Lee Bihua and Member Yee Chia Sing's comment. First, on the issue of the leases, I think we can't mandate the length of the leases because it's a commercial decision between the commercial entity renting out the place and the one taking the thing. Well, we accept the point, and I think you have made the point during the COS that the contract must be fair to both sides. And I think that is something that we will certainly encourage and look into. But I think we can't mandate every lease to be of a certain length, because I think the businesses also require certain flexibilities because of their different business models. On the other issue, I'd just like to reassure Member Lee Wee Hua that when there are issues that have to deal with anti-competitive behavior, then MTI together with CCCS will make sure we take it up as a Consumer and Competition Commission. We will take this up. But in all the things, we will have to strike a balance between protecting the consumer and facilitating the business and especially innovative practices, especially in current era whereby there's a proliferation of new business models, including the ones that you mentioned. We'll have to strike that right balance to make sure that we protect our consumers and yet at the same time not stifle innovative practices, and we have to find a balancing point as we continue to go along.
Mr. Leon Pereira.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I thank Minister Chan for his explanation. Just one supplementary question. Would MTI consider measuring and publishing the CPI based on different demographic groups? I know it is published based on income group, but there could be other demographic groups, such as the 3 groups where the government has presented its measures. For example, young couples, parents with young children, and retirees. Would the government consider publishing the CPI based on these groups? Because there could be certain factors, for example, price of milk powder could be one example, which affect certain groups by demographic characteristic rather than just by income characteristic, and that may enable us to have more well-informed debates about policy. Thank you.
So, Speaker, actually NPI already does that. So as you can see from the charts, we do have various ways to look at the data differently. So one dimension would be by income, the bottom 20th percentile, the middle 60th, and the top 20th percentile. So that's one dimension. The other dimension that you mentioned, like for example retirees, because they generally have either fixed or no income and they are living on their savings, but we are particularly concerned, and that's why over the last 5 years MTI has started monitoring this data, but it takes us some time to build up by different demographic groups, and we'll make available those data when we have them.